This is the AI Executive Brief, and I'm Stephen Forte. This is our weekend edition, where we put the headlines aside, pick one topic that matters, and go deep. No rapid fire, just clarity on something worth understanding well. This week, the AI Adoption Playbook. By the end of this episode, you will have a repeatable framework for taking your company through an AI transformation. Not the theory, but the 6 moves that actually work when you sit down with real teams, real operations, and real resistance. You will know where most companies stall, and you will know how to avoid it. I've been thinking about why so many AI initiatives look promising in the board deck and then somehow die of natural causes by Q2. And I think the reason is fairly simple. Most companies begin by shopping for technology before they have looked honestly at how work really happens. So let me give you a clean framework for this. First, see the business as it actually operates. Second, ask the uncomfortable first principles question. Third, treat AI as a new way of working, not a software install. Fourth, exhaust the market before you build anything. Fifth, find champions. Sixth, spread adoption through lots of small automations. That sequence matters. Let's start with the first step. This is not a software selection exercise, and it is definitely not one of those process mapping workshops where everybody behaves as if the company were run by Swiss train conductors. This is about understanding the business as it actually operates on a random Tuesday. What happens in most organizations is that leaders get the clean version. You ask how a task works, and people describe the official process, the approved sequence, the polished little corporate fairy tale. What they do not describe is the rework, the side messages, the spreadsheet someone keeps on a desktop called Final V7, or the heroic human improvisation holding the whole thing together. Why does that matter? Because if you automate the clean version, you do not remove friction, you accelerate fiction. And here is the question a CEO should ask at that point. Why do our pilots look good while enterprise impact stays suspiciously tiny? Usually because the pilot automated the diagram, not the labor. A practical example, we worked with a financial services firm, about 280 people, where leadership believed meeting prep took 30 minutes. Reasonable, tight, efficient, very professional. In reality, for one relationship review, a senior advisor, an analyst, an assistant, and someone in compliance were together spending about 4.5 hours pulling notes, assembling performance snapshots, checking obligations, and fixing inconsistencies between systems. 4.5 hours to create what the calendar described as 30-minute prep. Nobody was lying. They just never added it up. So what do you do with that? Map a real Tuesday. Not the process manual, not the onboarding deck, a real Tuesday. Interview people in cross-team pairs so the handoff gaps become visible. Put sales with finance, put operations with customer success, put legal with procurement. The point is not to catch people out. The point is to find correlation across the stories. When 3 different teams describe the same friction point from different angles, that is where AI can matter. And here is the hidden payoff. Once you do that work, your AI roadmap stops being a list of ideas and starts looking like a ranked list of bottlenecks. That is a much better place to spend money. Now, once you see the mess clearly, the next question is a little more unsettling because operational inefficiency is only half the story. The deeper issue is whether the business designed today would even take this shape in the first place. This is not a branding exercise, and it is not one of those innovation off-site questions people ask right before everyone returns to doing exactly what they were already doing. This is the first principles question. If you started this company today with the tools now available, would you build it the same way? That is the question that separates optimization from vulnerability. Pass 1 is simple. Ask it directly. If you restarted from scratch, would the workflow, staffing model, delivery model, pricing model, or even the product itself look the same? Why does that matter? Because if the honest answer is no, then some new entrant, unburdened by your org chart and your accumulated habits, gets to attack the market with a cleaner design. And that means your gap is not just inefficiency. It is strategic exposure. The rhetorical foil here is the one boards do not always ask loudly enough. If a newcomer using AI would build this differently from day one, why are we congratulating ourselves for making the old version 5% faster? I have seen this happen in the room. A CEO of a 120-person professional services business was asked exactly that question. Long pause. Not the performative kind. The real kind, where everyone starts staring at the table because they know the next sentence matters. And then he said, honestly, it would not even be the same business. That is the moment. That is the crack in the wall where the light gets in, because now you are not discussing a tool. You are discussing business design. And here is the part that matters most. This is not a tooling decision. It is a business design decision. If you get that wrong, you can spend a fortune modernizing a shape the market no longer wants. Now, that does not mean you burn everything down and announce a reinvention before lunch. Usually it means you identify where the gap is widest. Maybe the service model changes, maybe account management changes, maybe delivery gets rebundled, maybe internal reporting no longer deserves the same staffing pattern. But the important thing is that AI stops being a side project and starts becoming a lens on where the business is overbuilt, under-automated, or vulnerable to someone faster. Once you reframe it that way, the next trap becomes obvious. Leaders start acting as if AI adoption is mainly a technical rollout problem. It is not. This is not an ERP implementation, and it is not the robot apocalypse either. AI is less like teaching people which button to click and more like teaching them a different posture toward the machine in front of them. With ERP, the question is, what field, what button, what sequence? With AI, the question is, can you describe the problem clearly, judge the output, and iterate with good taste? That is a very different skill. It is also much more accessible than people think because it rides on natural language. Nobody has to learn syntax to get started. They already know how to ask, clarify, compare, and refine. In that sense, AI is not introducing a foreign behavior. It is formalizing one we already use every day. That is why I often tell teams to think of agents as additional employees. Very strange employees, obviously. They never sleep, never call in sick, and do not need a parking space, but still employees. You assign work, you evaluate output, you set boundaries, you improve the brief. People understand that instantly. It takes the mysticism down a few notches. Why does that matter? Because the biggest adoption barrier in many companies is not capability, it is intimidation. People think they are underqualified to use AI well when what they actually need is permission to experiment and a management model for doing it safely. And the question every leader hears at this point is some version of, is this taking jobs? My answer is blunt. AI will mostly take the leverage of people who refuse to learn it. For everybody else, it is velocity. And here is the thing to remember. Velocity is the point. More throughput, better first drafts, faster analysis, more shots on goal. Not magic, not instant wisdom, just a lot less time wasted on the dead weight of modern knowledge work. Take a finance team in a 45-person operating group. Monday morning dashboard prep took about 3 hours every week. Download reports, reconcile line items, fix labels, update commentary, distribute the pack. Then somebody gave the team a natural language workflow with the right access and a clean prompt sequence. The same task dropped to about 10 minutes of review and correction. 10 minutes. I still remember the CFO's face. It was not amazement exactly. It was the look of someone mentally calculating how many other rituals in the company were about to lose their sacred status. And here is where I would think out loud as a leader. If the tool is this capable, the question is not who do we replace? The question is, what do we finally have room to do well? Better analysis, better follow-up, better customer prep, better forecasting, better coaching. The good organizations will use AI to elevate all team members, not to create a priesthood of 3 prompt whisperers in the corner. That is why I like the champion model. Not the loudest people, the useful people. Find 2 or 3 in each department who are curious, practical, and generous. Train them first. Let them become the ones answering questions at the coffee machine. At a 300-person insurance brokerage, we identified 11 champions across 6 departments. 8 months later, those 11 people had trained over 120 colleagues through informal peer coaching. No formal program, no learning management modules, just people showing other people what they figured out. That is your sustainability mechanism. Without champions, adoption decays. The moment external support ends, with them, it compounds. And once people closest to the work can actually use the tools, the next mistake comes right on schedule. The company decides it now needs to build some grand internal platform to prove it is serious. This is not a referendum on custom software, and it is not a search for one giant platform that will somehow absorb every workflow in the company. In most cases, you should exhaust commercial options first. The reason is simple. The commercial market is moving at astonishing speed. These products are being built quickly, improved quickly, and in many cases built with AI and improved with AI. I've gone back and forth on this one because every leadership team likes to believe its process is unusually special. Usually it is not. Usually it is familiar dysfunction wearing a custom blazer. So before you commit engineers' timeline and political capital to a custom build, run a vendor sprint. See what already exists, push hard on demos, use your own data where you can. Stress the workflows that matter. Why does that matter? Because custom software freezes assumptions. It captures what you believed the problem was 6 months ago and then forces you to defend that belief because you have now spent real money on it. The rhetorical foil here is the one every operator should ask. Are we truly doing something bespoke enough to justify owning the burden forever? Or are we building because buying feels emotionally unsatisfying? Here is a practical example of what that discipline looks like. A 200-person logistics company was about to build a custom route optimization layer. We ran a 2-week vendor sprint instead. Off-the-shelf product got them 85% of the way there. They customized the last 15% with configuration, not code, shipped in 6 weeks instead of 9 months. Custom can be right. Of course, if you have genuinely unique process logic, regulated workflows, proprietary data interactions, or customer-facing differentiation that matters, fine, build. But that should be the exception, not a reflex. That vendor sprint discipline connects directly to the last piece of the framework, and I think this might be the most counterintuitive one. Instead of one big AI platform, deploy a constellation of small automations. Think a 600-person distributor with a head of operations trying to improve quoting, onboarding, collections, vendor intake, weekly planning, and service escalations. Not one moonshot. 9 small automations, a quote assistant that drafts responses, an onboarding helper that checks documents, a collections workflow that writes the first nudge, a planning agent that assembles the weekly ops pack. None of them heroic, all of them useful. Several built by non-technical teams using no-code tools because they are the ones close enough to the work to know where the friction actually lives. And here is why that matters more than the scale suggests. An F1 car is an extraordinary piece of engineering, but give it to someone who learned to drive on a stick shift, and everything around the tool becomes the issue. The same is true for a massive AI platform deployed to teams that were not involved in designing it. Small targeted automations built by the people who need them, that is the architecture that sticks. That approach wins for 2 reasons. First, people closest to the problems build better solutions. Second, 50 small automations usually outperform one monolithic platform because they can be tested, replaced, and improved without waiting for an internal committee to rediscover courage. So if I were compressing this into an execution sequence, it would sound like this: see the real work, ask whether the business should even be shaped this way, teach people to think with AI instead of fearing it, find champions, run a vendor sprint, then ship lots of small targeted automations. That is the framework, but the unifying thread underneath it is the part I would want you to carry into Monday. AI adoption is not mainly about installing a system. It is about redesigning how judgment, language, and work move through the company. Here's the closing line I think holds up in the meeting room. AI transformation starts when you stop asking what tool to buy and start asking how the work should exist. So today, map the real operation, ask the first principles question, reframe AI as a perspective shift, find and empower your champions, exhaust commercial options before building custom, and deploy a constellation of small automations. The thread running through all 6 is that the winners will not be the companies with the most dramatic AI announcement. They will be the ones that quietly rebuilt how work gets done. That is the AI Executive Brief for Saturday, March 28th. I am Stephen Forte. If this was useful, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I will be back Monday with more. Until then, stay sharp.